So I guess this is going to be a regular thing, as long as we can keep it up. But this sermon in particular, these are some notes from about a year and a half ago during COVID lockdown. The message I preached, it was from Luke 17, verses 11 to 19. And basically, the story begins where Jesus heals 10 lepers, and they're happy and they're overjoyed. But as the others are going, only one comes back to say thank you, to show gratitude, and to show his love for what Jesus did for him. And this was quite interesting because there were two major points that I picked from this entire verse. The first one was a lot of people fall in love with the things that are done for them and not who actually did them. And that one is something we've heard time and time again. We've seen it. But the other aspect, the one that majorly touched me a lot, was the fact that people weren't even observing Jesus's behavior. And what I mean by behavior was the fact that Jesus was doing what he was called to do. He wasn't living for the general approval of people. And my main point in the sermon, if I remember correctly, was a lot of people, their currency for why they serve, why they might be in ministry, or why they might be in the field they're in, is because their currency is gratitude. Their currency is approval. Now, that's fine, but what happens when you stop getting that paycheck? What happens when people stop saying, oh, thank you so much, or thank you for what you've done for me, or dude, you're so great at what you do? What happens when people stop? Because that in itself is a very, very large and evident possibility. And scripture shows us that that's a fact, that eventually people won't come back and say thank you. But for Jesus, it didn't matter because he was doing his Father's work. He was walking and living his life in his calling. But for a lot of us, what we tend to do is that when the paycheck stops coming, we stop doing what we're supposed to do because we were there for the gratitude and approval we were getting, and we weren't there for our calling. And that was the second point that really hit me about this, that Jesus would continue to do ministry regardless of if people showed him gratitude, if people came back and gave thanks. And nowadays, we have to put that into perspective. Why are you doing it? And will you continue to do it if nobody told you thank you, if nobody told you well done? Now, taking back to this is that this entire verse in scripture in the Bible is a data point for the church in a whole. That out of 10, only one came back to show gratitude and to show thanks. That's a data sheet for the entire church. How many of us come back to show thanks to God for what he has done? Come running back to just say, God, thank you. A lot of people say they do, but do they really? Because we saw 10 people walk away, only one come back. And it's been a verse that's always been humbling to me just because of what it means to come back and say thank you for even the little things God does. Because in our life, if you're forgetting to say thank you for the one who gave you what you have, not saying thank you to what you received. Because a lot of people think it's the same thing. They rejoice over what they've received and forget to thank the one who gave it to them. And that's extremely dangerous. But I remember sharing the sermon. It was one that also ministered to me too, because you get to see a part where you could also be missing on how you thank God and how serious you are about it. So there's that sermon note in and of itself. And I think looking back at the life of Jesus, if you're doing things for people and not as the instruction of the calling God gave you, you're going to land into some serious problems. And I mean serious problems. Because what happens when that paycheck stops coming? Because people who do things for approval, oof, you're going to be in a tough boat, because at the end of the day, it won't work out well at all, because you're not doing it for God. And people disappoint. I mean, we have a data sheet on people. Only one will come back and say thank you. In other words, out of 10, only one will come back. Out of 100, only 10 will come. Like, out of 1,000, only 100. Out of 10,000, only 1,000. Yeah, those numbers are they're pretty wild if you think about it. So it's always good to put it into perspective when embarking on what God has told you to do, and why are you doing it? It has to be for Him. It can't be for other people. It can't be for the happiness that other people say you bring them, or the joy that you bring them, or them saying thank you. It has to be about God. That's the only way. So, yeah, I think we're good. We're good. We're good on that one. It's there's a lot more in the notes, but we can share them another time. But apart from that, what's your currency? I guess I would leave you with that question. What's your currency? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is your currency the love of God, or is it the approval of man?